Hey, I'm live, or so it says. It's the Nazarite bringing you Hebrew lore from days of yore here in Jerusalem. So this one it's Hebrew lore classically, I suppose, traditionally, but I'm going to speak also about the Tao Te Ching, verse 20. Now, I'm doing this video because of a comment I received recently. Someone asked me about Reconstructionist Judaism, about Breslev. We've been going back and forth on Facebook in the Messenger. And he said, he asked me, do you think that you would be more into the Reconstructionist sort of crowd? Now, I don't know enough about Reconstructionist Judaism. I'll be the first to admit it. But I have heard things here and there, and he told me, yes, some of them are vegetarian or vegan. And he gave the example of the prayer shawl, right? The prayer shawl traditionally is made of wool, and if not the clothing itself, then the tassels are certainly made of wool, according to halacha at any rate. And so he said, do you think that in a different sort of congregation, right, not Orthodox or modern Orthodox, not even conservative, do you think in a Reconstructionist congregation you would be able to say, no, I'm not interested in wearing a prayer shawl because I'm vegan? Now I said likely, though I don't know. Like I said, I've never been to a Reconstructionist shul, right, a synagogue, nor do I know the congregations or their doctrine, their teachings, whatever the case may be. But I have a feeling that if it is indeed the fact that some of them are vegans and vegetarians, I think that nobody would enforce, because he used the word enforce. Would I be enforced to wear it? And I said, no, no, nowhere does it say that you must wear it. It says in the Torah, if you wear a certain type of clothing, right, four-cornered garment, then the tassels must be added, right? And halacha spoke of the beged, right, of the talis, the prayer shawl, a small one that's worn throughout the day, one that is worn only during specific prayers or times. I wore a prayer shawl every day for many years, and I sort of gave it up, if you will. And I only wear it. I haven't worn it in a long while, but that's just an example. And he said, and I told him, look, I'm not. He wasn't trying to convince me or talk to me about joining any group. He was just, we're just spitballing, right? A dialogue here. This guy is an Orthodox Christian from right, an Eastern Orthodox Christian, if I'm not mistaken, right, which is a very ancient tradition. We've been speaking, and he showed me a few clips on the similarities between Christian Orthodox services, liturgy, right? Is that the word? And their churches, right? And how it sort of corresponds to the different Hebrew rituals and things having to do with the temple. And yes, the similarities are definitely there. Sure, they take it very much in a Yeshua sort of way because they are Christian, but there's still a lot, I think, to be learned from such a way which makes it, well, which attempts in their own way to be closer to the Hebrew rituals. Now, they're not Hebrew. They would be, again, the first to admit that, I'm sure. Hey, hey, look at that. Yodidiao is back, and Karen is here. Hello, Oregon Freebird. All right. So I want to read the Tao Te Ching 20. This is from the taoteching.com. I don't really know who made the translation. Maybe it's written here. Yes. Translation by S. Mitchell. All right. So let's see. I'm going to read it now. Right, that translation. Stop thinking and end your problems. What difference between yes and no? What difference between success and failure? Must you value what others value? Avoid what others avoid? How ridiculous. Other people are excited as though they were at a parade. I alone don't care. I alone am expressionless, like an infant before it can smile. Other people have what they need. I alone possess nothing. I alone drift about like someone without a home. I am like an idiot. My mind is so empty. Other people are bright. I alone am dark. Other people are sharper. I alone am dull. Other people have a purpose. I alone don't know. I drift like a wave on the ocean. I blow as aimless as the wind. I am different from ordinary people. I drink from the great mother's breasts. End quote, or translation. Now, in the Hebrew translation by Nisim Amon that I have in my own Tao Te Ching, right, the Hebrew one, there are a couple of different translations that I know of. The one that I've been walking with for a few years is the one by Nisim Amon, and the translation is very different. But I'll go with this English one since I'm broadcasting here in English. This idea of the loneliness of the sage. the loneliness of he or she who walk that path. You could be part of a Hasidic group. You could be part of a congregation, right? A shul, a synagogue. You can be part of this people or that people, right? This denomination or that denomination. You could come together, right? Ashkenazi, Sfarad, Yemenite. That you could have your group, and yet at some point, eventually, there's this real deep loneliness that is the lot of the sage, or he or she who walk the path. Because who's a sage, right? But those who try to walk in the path, to try to walk the way, if we're talking about the Tao Te Ching. And he says here, I alone drift about, like someone without a home. I am like an idiot. My mind is so empty. I've known that feeling many, many times, and I've usually felt it in a kind of negative sort of way. But the truth of the matter as I see it, in retrospect and in going forward, there is great merit to walking it alone. It doesn't mean that you don't learn from others. It doesn't mean that you may have a group, you may have a congregation, but you must, I think, at some point in life decide to walk it alone. Or must. Who's to say what one must do? I felt called very much to go it alone. And a few years ago, back, I mean, 7, 8 years ago, when I was in therapy at the time, my therapist told me, and I've mentioned this. She told me that it would be good for me to have a group. It would be good for me to have a people that I call my own. And now she also said this because I didn't have a place that was my own other than my home, and that's a great thing. But and I didn't have a certain congregation or a shul. I didn't have people that I connect with as a group, and I saw that as a necessity, a kind of necessity. And this was before I ever read the Tao Te Ching. This is simply from learning Torah and from different teachings. Um, right. So Lao Tzu starts here by saying, "Stop thinking and end your problems." This idea of action, the action of inaction, right? Wu Wei, what's called Wu Wei in Mandarin or Chinese, whatever the language is. And he says, what really is the difference between yes and no, between success and failure? Must you value what others value? Avoid what others avoid? How ridiculous. You don't have to do something just because other people are doing it. And insofar as I'm talking about the guy's comment, I don't have to wear a prayer shawl. Halacha says if I wear this garment, it needs to have a prayer shawl. It needs to have tassels, right? And it becomes a prayer shawl. Or it could be right, the one that you wear under your clothing. Some people wear it over the clothing. I've worn the smaller daily shawls, and I've worn the synagogue prayer shawls, the larger ones, and I haven't of late because of the veganism and because of a couple of other things. But he says, right, Lao Tzu says, other people have what they need, I alone possess nothing. Other people are bright, I'm dark. They're sharp, I'm dull. They have a purpose, and I don't know. And there's great utility and wonder in admitting your ignorance and knowing that really, after all, you're drifting about. But where is it that you are letting the wind carry you? You know, something along those lines. And he says here, I am different from ordinary people. I drink from the great mother's breasts. And I remember just offhand in the Hebrew translation by Nisim Amon, he says, I do not wait at any table. I suckle directly from the breast of nature. Something along those lines. I always likened this current day Orthodox rabbinic Judaism to those of you who follow might already, see where I'm going with this. I likened it in the past to the leftovers of a great feast, where the leftovers themselves, right, they have a lot of meaning and they can do a lot and they can sustain you. But is it the great feast? No, it's what's left after that, after everyone has left the banquet hall and you're left with the scraps. And I'm not trying to put a negative spin on it, but in my mind, I said I don't want to settle for the scraps. And maybe that's wrong of me, because maybe those scraps are the real deal, but I simply I couldn't do it. I said to myself, there's a long tradition, right, of Torah and of the Hebrew faith. And I see, right, from my experience, that walking the path of halacha, that's where it's leading me. And some people might say, no, 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 I did it the wrong way, and I should only stick to rabbinic, halacha, Orthodox tradition, Shulchan Aruch, as it's known, and not go left or right, as it says in the Torah, right? In the Torah, it says that if you have something where your local jurisdiction, your local well, person of authority and judgment, right? The local ruler doesn't know what to do. You go to Jerusalem. It doesn't say Jerusalem. It says the place which God chooses. You speak to the you speak to the priests there, right? Or the judges, the rulers, whatever the case may be, a prophet. And we don't have those, but we do have the rabbinic traditions that were handed down. And according to rabbinic tradition, it was handed down in an unbroken line. Different things were added, other things cannot be taken away. And now we are 2,000 years almost after the destruction of the Second Temple, and we are left with most of the Torah being, well, not part of daily life because most of the Torah has to do with ritual worship. We have no ritual worship. So, even in the sense of purely technical, even in the purely technical sense, we are dealing with these scraps, if you will, of what used to be. But it doesn't have to be that way, not necessarily. And in my mind, until there is a temple, if we merit it, and until all that comes about, and again, I think it's going to be a vegan third temple, but that's beside the point. It's like now, here I am. What is the path that I ought to follow? Whose path, if at all, must I follow, or I ought to be following? And like I said, halacha, which literally means walking, has led me to where I am now. With all of my failures and all of my wrongdoing, I still feel that there's a lot to it. And I may end up regretting these times that I walk alone, all of these years. But I can see, at least with my own inadequate kind of vision, insufficient vision, and it is insufficient, that the feedback that I'm getting from creation, from my life, is saying, yes, in spite of all of my insufficiencies and inadequacies, what I'm holding on to is a great path, a great way. Walk it alone. And I've mentioned the Zen koan in the past, right? Right, the Buddhist teaching, when you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him, right? You have teachers, you have enlightened people teaching you, and you want to gain it, but to gain true enlightenment, if you will, and the nature of that I leave up to you, you're going to have to walk it alone. It's the path of the individual, which makes up the group, or that is part of the group. It doesn't make up the group, it's part of the group. This idea of not waiting at any table, not waiting for any scraps, not waiting even for a meal to be served to me by the most enlightened people, to suckle directly from the breasts of the great mother, right, of nature. And this is a double-edged sword. Nature, right, the great feminine, is the calm, and it's also the storm, right? Nature has its order, but it's also very random and chaotic and devouring, like the sea, right? David Data in The Way of the Superior Man, he says that in some cases anyway, the feminine is like the sea, whereas the masculine builds ships and different vessels in order to traverse the sea and get from A to B, the sea is not looking to get from A to anywhere. It just is, right? And every tiny wave and every tiny crest, however minute, every tiny drop, it's not a drop in the ocean, it is the ocean. I hope I'm not getting too out of my, over my own head here, but it all comes together for me, right? The way of the superior man, the Tao Te Ching, Torah, and the way that I'm walking. And this is not to say that I'm doing it right, but this is what's leading me. This verse, I love the Tao Te Ching. I love that Hebrew translation. I've read other translations here and there, not entire books translated. I only have the one, but I definitely will at some point. This verse, right? Verse 20, chapter 20, verse 20. It's so it's so difficult to read because it touches me. It hits way too close to home sometimes. I'm an idiot. My mind is empty. Everyone else seems like they know what's going on, and I alone am dark and dull. But, and this is the great but, the big but I'm going it alone. I don't need to be like the others. I don't need the scraps or the banquet. I don't need the prayer shawl or those to enforce it, those to accept it, accept me not wearing it, or reject me not wearing it. I don't. Yes, I usually don't kill living things, but if they are in my own home attacking me, I kill them. Or if they're attacking. Otherwise, I usually just try to capture them and let them go. Different living things, but I just killed something live on air. Yes. All right, let's see if there's anything in the chat. Okay. So Karen says, so first of all, hi, hello there, hi. Karen says, Shalom, we have a Reconstructionist congregation in our town. It is our only Jewish congregation that I know of. I have not attended, however. So why haven't you? I know you said that the I know you said that you aren't able to get to a shul or find a shul. I'm not sure what you said at the time. It escapes me. But if you have one, is there a reason, a specific reason you'd like to share, Karen, why you haven't attended any services there? Is it because you want to go it alone, or is it because of other, more personal reasons or technical reasons? So Oregon says, well, Karen says, I also am a fan of the path of the individual, right? And that carries a great danger with it, because what do I know? What do any of us know? It's getting that it's taking the risk, right? Halacha has been around for thousands of years. In its current form, it's disputed and there are different traditions, but halacha is halacha. And according to rabbinic tradition, without a Sanhedrin, without the elders, right, you're not allowed to take away anything. And so we are left to deal with what was given to us for better or worse. But the path of the individual, despite the danger, it holds such promise. Even if you screw it up royally, it's your screw up. It's yours and it's your responsibility. And there's, on the other hand, I have to say, hey, look at that. The Nazarene Nazarite is here. I actually made it this time. He says, LOL. Hello to you, Nazarene Nazarite. S.E. Hall. Good to have you here. That path of the individual, I really do think that there's so much promise because, again, despite my sin and my wrongdoing, despite me not living up to the potential that I know that I can, and despite all of the things that might be pointing me or pointing against it conceptually, right? Insofar as tradition is concerned and who we are and what we're doing and all that, I could not escape this path of the individual. I don't know. Even if I find a congregation, and I'm not in the market, but even if I do find a congregation that is more aligned with myself, my values and conduct than the modern Orthodox group that I grew up in, and I still consider myself like loosely a part of. Even if I do find it, what does it mean? It means that I what? That I join? It means that I pay dues? What does it mean? Does it mean that I'm accepted by the group? It could mean so many things, but I find that at least right now, and this might change, there is a sadness, there is a loneliness, there is solitude in walking this path. But solitude is something that I'm very much a fan of. I practice it on a daily basis. Time to be alone. Set aside a time to be alone, even if it's only for 2 minutes, where you are alone with yourself. You could do sitting meditation, zazen, you could speak, hitbodedut, whatever it is that you do, but designate time alone because that's when things that are, let's say, apart from the group, unique to you, can be manifested. This could also obviously take place within the group. And I've had very individualistic experiences within Orthodox shuls and egalitarian shuls and other shuls. This guy asked me right on the chat if I ever have felt drawn to go to a Breslov. To a Breslov synagogue, and I said yes. I've gone many times to Breslov synagogues in the past, usually on Shabbos, and it was very. He asked what was it like, and I said heavenly, and it really was. Part of it was the group dancing together, yelling the prayers together, not in unison, but together. There is so much there. But I feel like right now, at this point in my life, I don't think that I'm missing it. I don't think that I'm missing it because I think that this path of the individual, right, the way, the walk, it's something that has gripped me for years. And it fulfills me, it sustains me because I know that no matter what happens, it's my responsibility. All the shitty things that I do and all the good things that I do. It's not because, well, by and large, it's not because I'm a part of any group. It's not because I'm going along with the herd. And the herd does have its utility. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way. Is because I've come to the conclusion, again, maybe false, maybe led by ego and shirking responsibility and taking off the yoke of halacha. Again, all that might be true. Inescapably, this is what I'm doing. I can't not do what I'm doing here, which is also how I know, to the degree that I can, that this is what I ought to be doing. It's my path, it's your path, whatever path it is, it's you as an individual. And again, it doesn't mean that you can't learn from others. It doesn't mean that you can't be taught. It doesn't mean that you can't receive. But eventually it comes down to you. and the way that you feel. And again, I'm going to go back here to chapter 20 of the Tao Te Ching. Hmm. And he says, wait, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Right. So he says, other people are excited as though they were at a parade. And the idea of the parade, of people marching in unison, great crowds all going together, happy, happy. And the individual, the sage, the one who walks the path, the way, whatever the case may be, however you want to define it, there's an inescapable loneliness in this path. Now, you could make the existential claim that we are all very much alone and in solitude. We're born alone, we die alone, right? We cannot share other people's consciousnesses, at least not in any long term kind of way, nor should that be, I think. That would be, I don't know what that would be, but we are people, right? We all carry that existential burden of being. But he or she who make it their own, because you can be suffering existentially and still force yourself to be part of a group for whatever sake, for whatever merit it has. I did it for a long time. And I found that the path that I was walking along with the group, I was walking in that parade. And I felt the need to break away, not for the sake of breaking away, but it's simply where I was led. And so, even though, right, as he says in the Lao Tzu says, even though I am dark and dull, purposeless, and I blow as aimless as the wind, there is great promise there. I think that when handled properly, and again, I leave that up to you what that means, there's virtue in it, real virtue. Because when you understand or internalize to the degree that you can, that it's all on you. It's on you. The good, the bad, the ugly, the miraculous. It's all inside you. You're not a drop in the ocean. You are the ocean, right? You're not just a node in a network. You are that network. If you are so inclined, right, to send out those feelers. This idea of Torah, and in these Torah portions, we're reading about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, right, Esau, Ishmael, and everything that happened there. Later on, leading to the 12 tribes of Israel, and Judah, who goes it alone. Judah, who breaks away from his brothers and goes and has his own experiences, and then returns, if you will, fortified, strengthened by the experiences that he had, and eventually, genealogically, leading to the birth of the Messiah, right? Peretz, Chetzron, etc., etc. The lineage is in the end of the book of Ruth, right? The book of Ruth, where you have the lineage starting with Peretz, leading all the way to King David. And so, walking alone, you might feel dull and dark, aimless, sad, lonely, in solitude. But the place where you are going, and I don't mean like, no, not going, the place where you are, because you're not going anywhere. The place where you are, that's what you ought to be doing. When Judah made that decision to go, and leave his brothers and then later on come back, it means something. He was the only one, if I'm not mistaken, right? That we're talking now. Joseph went it alone as well under very different circumstances, and I won't get into it right now. But Judah and Joseph both represent two facets of the kingship. And as we know, there's Mashiach ben Yosef, there's Mashiach ben David, two types of messiahs, right? A physical, spiritual, yang, yin, that whole thing. All right. I think I'm gonna say goodbye unless there's anything in the chat. Oh, okay, so there's stuff in the chat. Let's see. Karen says, I have been in congregations before, not Jewish. When you reject integral parts of a group teaching, it tends not to go well. I tend to agree. I don't want to make connections with people that will be broken later. Well, you're kind of laboring under the assumption that such a thing will break later, but I understand what you're talking about, because you could be, right, ostracized and excommunicated. I know people who are thrown out of shuls for not doing this or not being that. I saw in my day, and I don't mean to badmouth Orthodox Judaism, I really don't, but I saw all kinds of games of honor and pride and ego that go along with being part of a congregation. I also saw many wonderful, amazing, uplifting, life-affirming things having to do with a congregation. There's a lot of wonderment in doing things as a group, because you might be flawed, you might be failing, but the group, right? It's a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. And that's exactly why the group, that's exactly why, for instance, Even though we are all defiled by death, technically speaking, halachically speaking, we are still allowed to make certain sacrifices in the name of the group, things like Passover, right, and other offerings which we are allowed to offer, even though we are impure, because even though the individuals as such are impure, Israel is not. Israel, the group, remains pure in a higher way, in a way which the individual cannot fully embody or grasp. There is that spark of Moses Messiah, right, Moshe Mashiach, that is said to be, I guess, equivalent to the group in some way, but I'm not going to get into it right now. Let's see. Karen says, I can no longer stand groupthink. It is lonely yet comforting at the same time. Right, I suppose it is, because on the one hand, you're part of a group and you're doing the group thing and you feel fulfilled and sustained by that. On the other hand, you might find that you're not being you, you're being the group. Now, can these things come together? I believe so. Case in point, ritual worship in the temple. Every week, the priests and the Levites and the Israelites would switch on Shabbos. People would come in for a week and people would leave after having served their week. During Shabbos, with the bread, the offering of the 12 loaves of bread, this is where, if I'm not mistaken, the shifts would change. Once every 6 months, priest, a Levite, and an Israelite would be at the temple 3 times a year for the 3 pilgrimage holidays, the Shlosha Regalim, right? Passover, Sukkot, and Shavuot. Then they would all, presumably, right, be gathering there. And so you have this idea of being part of the group, and then you have the idea of being the individual, right? When you went to offer a sacrifice, there was one priest who slaughtered, there was one priest who skinned, there was a priest who offered this, that, or the other. It's laid out in the Mishnah on how these things would be offered literally to the temple, in what procession, right? What was the order? A lot of things going on there. I think the Torah has, to a great degree, it allows the individual to be the individual and to still be part of the group. And I know that I have felt that way in the past, but having gone through the experiences, my own subjective personal experiences, I couldn't find comfort in the group. I didn't find myself there. Now, you could make the claim, no, it's just because you haven't found the right group. Maybe. And there's certainly a case to be made, for me feeling more aligned and in tune with one group than another group. But just the idea of the walk and the individual, it's something that each and every one of us, human beings, we carry this. We carry that existential burden, whether we are religious or secular, whether we are atheist or agnostic, believers, whatever religion or faith we subscribe to or not, we carry that burden alone. To be able to come to terms with that, and, as much as one can, and to embrace it, it means that you're not sitting at the table waiting to be served. It means that you are suckling directly from the breast of the great mother, right, of nature. And even though that does come with a price, and it's a very heavy price sometimes, maybe all the time, right? Like Lao Tzu says, there's still so much merit, so much utility there for the individual, because it makes you more accountable. It makes you, or it has the potential to get you to be more responsible, because you can't put everything on the group. You can't say this, that. No, it's me. It begins and ends with me. Is that the ego talking? Could be, but still it's me. And yes, you could argue, what is the me, what is the self, who is it that is talking about the self, that whole philosophical thing. But I'm talking very plainly, right? I'm just a dumbass here, talking very plainly. To have that walk, sometimes you feel aimless, sometimes you feel like you have no purpose, you feel dark and dull and like an idiot. But it's you are dark, you are dull, you are the idiot, which means, right, that for every action or force, right, there is an equal and opposite reaction. It means that if you feel aimless, you can find an aim. If you feel dark, you can become enlightened. If you feel dull, you can sharpen yourself up. It's on you. I think that's the point, or part of the point, that Lao Tzu, right, is trying to make there. You're not sitting at any table. You're not waiting to be served. You're not at the banquet hall. You're outside in nature doing your thing. And there's a lot there for those who choose to go that path. And I definitely understand, growing up religious Orthodox, I definitely understand those who begin and end with the group. I do. I understand it. I get it. I lived it. But the path of the individual, the walk, the way, it calls to me, I think, in a different place, one that I cannot ignore, one that I can't say, oh, no, 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 I should be, a man of halacha and go with the group and go to a shul, and I simply can't do it, at least at this point right now. Oh, okay, so my father is here. Hello, father dear. Your message was retracted. Okay. So let's see, maybe you'll write a different one. In the meantime, the Nazarite says, personally, I feel like I'm in one with more than one group, and yet in some cases, no groups. Right, well, see, I'm the same way, right? I'm speaking English, I'm in Israel, I am Ashkenazi, right? I grew up modern Orthodox, I have all of these groups. Do I ascribe do I say that this is my identity, part of who I am? Only very loosely. And again, this is not to poo-poo the groups, but simply to say that the group is not enough, or at least at this point in my life, and for the last I don't know how many years, the group was something where I found there's a lot there, but I found something greater, at least for now. And even though maybe I'll regret this, and in retrospect I'll say, "Oh no, that was such a foolish thing. I should have stayed with the group." I well, I don't, and I can't, at least not long term. All right, I think I'm going to say goodbye. Maybe I'll wait for my father to send that message. Hi, father. No, maybe not. I think I'm going to go. All right. Let's see. Let's see. Was there anything else? Was there anything else? Right. I think what I want to do, what I'm going to do, maybe on Wednesday, what I'm going to do is take this chapter of the Tao Te Ching that was translated to English by S. Mitchell in the taoteching.com, and I'm going to translate to the English from the Hebrew translation in the book that I have. I think that's what I'm going to do. And yes, and that's that. Let's have a good night. Laila Tov, says my father. Laila Tov to you. A blessed night, a good night, full of sweet dreams and positive vibrations. Or if your day is just beginning wherever you are, or it's the afternoon, I thank you. I thank you for joining me. I deeply appreciate it, your time and your kind attention. It means a lot to me, and I hope I'm not just rambling incoherently. Or even if I am, maybe at some point, I say one tiny little thing in 32 minutes that makes a bit of sense and that helps someone. I know I'm helping myself, right? But because this serves to reaffirm the things that go on in my mind. And I don't know exactly how I'm affecting you people out there, but I hope that you also have found a little bit of value in these blah blah blahs. I'll see you on Wednesday, God willing. Laila Tov. Thanks for being here. God bless.